Two-time Fred Astaire Award nominee Crystal Joy Brown made her acting debut in the national tour of the hit Broadway musical Rent, an embedded force in Broadway across 5 shows, including currently as Eliza in Hamilton, mustering mid-song applause during her big number Burn each night. Screen credits include Raising Kanan, Equalizer, She-Ra, Princesses of Power, and the upcoming Hallmark film Girlfriendship in October. From stage to screen, Crystal Joy Brown evokes all dynamics of the human experience. This extends to her activism in all forms, including Show Pride for Black Lives and Hand for Progress. A multi-hyphenate in every sense. Thank you so much, Crystal Joy Brown, and welcome to the For Your Reference podcast.
Well, that was by far my favorite intro ever. Wow, thank you. I'm going to need you to write that down and send it to me so I can put it on my wall. Because it's because when you say it all together, it's like, wow, that's, as an artist and as an actor, you kind of just are always looking for the next thing. As an activist, you're always looking at the world and being like, oh gosh, I can never do enough to make any sort of change. So sometimes hearing that you've done some things actually sounds really nice. You know what I mean?
It's you. We're talking about you.
It's easy to forget when you're doing 8 shows a week. so that's awesome. And I'm so happy to be here with you guys and chat about all of these things.
We're glad to have you. So how did you get started in Broadway?
Oh man. I mean, as a kid, I kind of knew that I wanted to be in a medium where I got to do all the things that I love to do, which was dancing, singing, and acting. And musical theater was really the only place for that. I mean, you could have some big, musical theater films, but mainly it was like seeing stage and theater. And I went to the ballet. My grandmother took me to the ballet when I was really young. And I saw that was kind of my true professional first live theater experience. And I was just like, oh my gosh, people are doing this. This is amazing. And then I saw Rent on tour with my sister. I'm from Virginia, and we went to the National Theater to see it, and we camped out to see it. And it was the first time that I had really seen a really diverse group of people living in the city of my dreams, New York City, and in a community. And I was like, oh my gosh, I saw myself in that. I saw the place that I wanted to live, which was New York. And I saw a bunch of artists, trying to make it, which is that story. And I was just like, this is what I need to do. This is what I want to do. So I went to school in New York for musical theater. I went to AMDA, and I graduated. I did the whole thing in a year and a half because I just knew I needed to just get to theater and get to learning the hard way, which is just experience. And I did the national tour of Rent playing Mimi. That was my first professional gig. So I feel like as a child, I manifested that in some weird way. But then 3 or 4 years later, I got my Broadway debut in Hair. I was the first person to replace, and that was kind of a crazy experience because I was an understudy. I also had an onstage track, and a lot of the stuff is kind of trial by fire. And I learned that show, I think, in a week, and then I had to quickly learn my understudy, which was understudying Dion, who sings the opening number at Aquarius. And I think I had about 1 rehearsal for that role, and so it was insane. Yeah, my first Broadway experience was nuts, but I learned so much. But I always kind of knew that I wanted to be able to do all of the things that I possibly could, singing, dancing, and acting in one place.
And you talk about in Rent with the diversity, and even now currently in Hamilton, everyone that wasn't into musicals would download the soundtrack and really get into the fanfare of Hamilton, and talking about casting, different sort of actors, not just necessarily true to history. How does it feel being a part of such a production? And we would love to talk about the activism in a second, but how did it feel, and how does it feel now being a part of such a monumental global shift?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first saw Hamilton in 2016, and when I first saw the lineup, we call it the timeline, where everyone in the first number stands across the stage. It's a very iconic moment. And I just saw all of these colors, body shapes, heights, it was just the representation of what, what we are, and what just a large diaspora of all of us are, like I was just like, wow, I see everything, and so rarely do I walk into a Broadway house and get to see that level of representation. And so for me, it was just like continuing to further that message. And every time I see, a kid in the audience that looks like me, and I get to meet them in the after the show, and I get to meet them and have a one-on-one experience with them, and them telling me what their dreams are. I remember when I stood at the stage door and talked to the artists that I loved and got inspiration from them, So it means a lot to be a part of something that has this far of a reach, that can reach across people who have never liked musical theater, thought it was so uncool, and I like to be a part of those stories that kind of cross over, like Rent was a rock musical, right? So a lot of people came into it like loving that, like didn't really necessarily love musical theater, the traditional musical theater, but they liked it from this kind of edgier stance. And that's kind of what Hamilton has done. It's brought people in because of hip hop music, and hip hop and Black culture is so, it is culture, it is the culture, that I think it made a gateway for more people to be like, oh, that's cool. Oh, it's about history. Oh, and like continue to open doors in that way. So it's always amazing to be able to be a representative in that way.
So do you find that there's a difference between being on screen and stage performances? And if so, how do you navigate those two?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because like in a theater, you're trying to reach the person in the furthest seat. You're trying to reach 2,000 people, right? And so there is a bigness to theater, and then there is a smallness to film. And I've like, I think that I have learned most things by fire, like just by trial and being like, oof, like, okay, that was a little big, girl, like pull it back, but, and so there's so much specificity that in film, like you just have to do so much less. And I'm so bad at doing less. So I'm always like, okay, I have to just trust. I have to have more trust, I think, with film and TV. Because also you can't do it again and again. Like I can do a show on Broadway and be like, oh, that wasn't my best. But then I'm like, oh, I can do it tomorrow and hopefully do it better the next time. But with film and TV, it's a long process, but it also takes so much time to set up. But then when it's your turn to do the scene, you have like maybe 3 takes, so you kind of have to have this ability to let it go quicker and just be like, okay, I'm prepared and I trust myself. And so there's a different level of trust, I think, that I have to have with film and TV with myself, and a more intimate, being more intimate with the camera, being more intimate with your partner. You're not yelling across the stage trying to like make sure everyone can hear you, and understand all 5 bajillion words that you're trying to spit out. So yeah, it is an adjustment, and it's something that I'm always like trying to figure out, and also bring things in both worlds. Like maybe there can be a little bit more bigness in some film moments and TV moments, and maybe there can be more simplicity and tenderness and like specificity in the theater. So I'm learning from both, and I try to keep doing playing with all of the things, all the modalities of acting, and seeing what hits.
Love it. And you talk about not yelling at your co-star, and I do love London Brown, and I am able to separate the actor from the character, even though I feel like yelling. Let's talk about Raising Kanan. We love this show, and we love your character specifically. Talk to us a bit about how it all came about, and how was it filming, because we're seeing you every episode and we're like, there's Crystal, she's here, she's back.
Yeah, the craziest thing about this series was that I was in Greece when I got the audition. Just with my best girlfriend. Well, it was like the world was still pretty closed, but Greece was open. And so my best friend and I, who's an accountant, went to Greece together, and I was like, I got this audition. I was like, I don't even know this. I was like, I don't know. I don't even think I should do it. Like I didn't even have really any like supplies to do this self-tape. And I'm with my friend who is not an actor at all. And we were like, okay, let's just do it. Let's just film it. So we filmed it together. And I sent it in and I was like, oh, well, like this is not going to go anywhere. And then 3 weeks later, I get a call that's like, hey, you just got an offer. And I was like, wait, what? I was so confused. And I was like amazed. And then I got on set and I'd already like seen the show. I know Patina Miller, like I know Haley Kilgore. They're also
Yeah.
Broadway legends at this point. And and I was just like, this is so cool, like to have, uh, you know, a show that really is using Broadway actors
Yeah.
and is also telling like an incredible story that's like really strong, a very extraordinarily strong female perspective, but then also like just the cinematography, like every
Yeah.
single detail. The show is so detailed, which I loved. And which I love about it is that they really go into the nitty gritty, and it's also raw, but it's also a family story. And what I got really excited about with my character is that we're talking about mental health
Yeah.
in this kind of roundabout way, in a very 90s way. It's not a very like 2022 way, like we're all talking about mental health now, but we, especially as a black person growing up, like you just didn't talk about your mental health issues. You didn't talk about anger. You didn't talk about your resentments or what was going on with you. You just kind of um pushed it down, suppressed it, and the fact that this was something that they were excited to start talking about in a way.
Yeah.
um I mean, maybe Renee is not always professional, but she's, she's for the most part, she's out here trying to, you know, support and be a representative of Black therapists, Black social workers, and and I think it's kind of interesting, perfect timing for how we're all kind of talking about mental health and
Yeah.
what we can do to take care of ourselves. So it's an interesting way to sneak that in there.
And I think there's textbook therapy and there's Marvin needs a bit more handling therapy.
Yeah, like she's very put together,
Yeah.
but she can turn, honey. She
Yeah.
can she can talk to him in his language, but
Yeah.
she can also, keep it together and keep it very polished when need be. But she can get him together as well. And I think that that's like the fun thing about their dynamic, um, is that they pull something out of each other that
Yeah.
I, either one doesn't always get to show. She doesn't get to show her I'm gonna snatch you upside all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't get to show his kind of vulnerable, like I'm working through this, I'm processing some of this stuff side.
And I think that's part of when we talk about not just in front of the screen, but behind the screen. When you have Black people telling stories, naturally we're going to cover territory that was never covered when I guess they weren't writing their own stories, right? And I think
Right.
that's something beautiful about even the most recent episode. There was like a warning about like distasteful like sort of portrayals, and we're like, why would we put something like that? And then obviously because they have like an Italian sort of presence, and
Mm-hmm.
it reminds me of, is it The Departed,
Yeah.
where you have like the first 11 minutes, which is like a HR video for everyone and what not to say about women, about Black people, and that sort of thing. So to have that, and then you think about like other films that aren't necessarily written by Black people that wouldn't even have that warning with all of that distasteful sort of language. There's more of a care because the people are the experiences, are the stories.
Yeah, it's so important for us to be telling our stories and to be writing for ourselves, because I think there is a level of care, but it's also people of all walks of life having a better understanding too, because not everybody on the creative team is of color, and so it's every single person having an awareness and having care for how people receive these things, how people are treated.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an entire collective team that is kind of shifted and is also going with that. It's not just the Black people doing the work; it's everybody. It's everybody that's hired, that's making sure that that work is done and essential and at the forefront. And a trigger warning is always nice, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we have to, because it's easy to become desensitized, you know, it's easy for us to forget our humanity. I think
Yeah.
sometimes when we're just watching a lot of violence or watching a lot of things like Breaking Bad or whatever, like we just are like ingesting so much um, that we also want to remind people like this is maybe not how not to be, you know, or
Yeah.
you know, like have a moment to be like this is like fiction, and
Yeah.
you know we need to separate those two things, and with real elements of reality, you know, like some of these things are true lived experiences. So it is it's a delicate balance, and I think that this show does it so beautifully, and I think having a woman at the center of it is
Yeah.
very helpful for that.
Yeah, so speaking of reality, you're involved in Show Your Pride for Black Lives and Harmful Progress. So how did you get started? How did you get involved? Tell us a bit more about your endeavors in this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that Trayvon Martin's murder was like one of the first moments that I really was like, okay, I have to figure out a way. I was doing Motown at the time, and we did a big protest in Times Square, and you know, 2020 was happening, and it was like what I call the trifecta: um, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna
Breonna Taylor.
Taylor, George Floyd. George Floyd. It was just like, and we're all sitting there and just watching this. And I think it was the first time that people couldn't look away and be like, well, I'm busy, you know, I'm
Yeah.
doing this, and be like distracted. And it was just, it became so untenable that it was like, even though COVID was running rampant, like it was just like, I have to go to the streets, you know, I have to go outside, and I have to go and be a body. I have to be a number, you know, so that people know. Um, Regardless of what happens, it became very like life and death, because I want my children to grow up in a world where they are not terrified of the people we pay to protect them, but they're not terrified to have conversations at school about their sexual identity or their um, or race. You know, I want them to feel like they are truly free, um, and I want to feel free. I want to feel free to have those rights as well. And I don't want to be scared every time I walk outside. So, you know, it was June of 2020, and I was just like, okay, gay pride's not going to happen, obviously.
Mm.
And being a person who identifies as queer, I was like, how do I merge Broadway and gay pride and in 11 days?
Yeah.
And I wanted it to coincide with to coincide with what would have been gay pride weekend. And it was just a bunch of phone calls, a bunch of like, okay, who can do this, who wants to help? We got all of these organizations together. I called my doctor, and I was like, will you do COVID testing? And she was like, absolutely. We got how many organizations? We got the Gay Men's Health. We got and we got STD testing. We got so many things. But
Yeah.
the number one thing that I think we got was like this amazing community to come together at in Times Square, and we marched to Stonewall, and we and it was really just a colorful celebration of life, and also incorporating Broadway and theater as best as we could. I mean, we had a full stage and a full sound system. I really truly don't know how we pulled it off, but we did. And it was just kind of the spark to be like, okay, wow, like we, I can do something, we can do things, and we have to start voicing what's going on. So then we had a meeting with Hamilton, like we have this massive platform, you know, what are we doing in this moment? What can we do? And this show represents so many people that, you know, what do we want to say with it? And we got together, and we had two people from each company come together, because we had like five North American companies, and we just started figuring out organizations to work with, like Until Freedom, Vote Writers, and we started doing um, letter writing parties. We started doing fundraisers, and for anything, it was we had a big vote in 2020. So we were just like, okay, how do we get people out to vote? How do we register people? How do we, what are our focuses? And then now we just are figuring out things to do in various communities. Monthly, we have things that we talk about to try to get people engaged in either democracy or understanding, like, you know, certain elements of AAPI culture that you may not know, or from the perspective of one of our castmates. So it's been interesting, like growing the social justice arm and like social awareness arm of the company, and just seeing where it can go, and working with incredible people who are excited, obviously, to work with the brand, but then also to do good.
Talking about marching at Stonewall, understanding like the historical context, because a lot of the activists for the queer movement were Black trans women. So it's so important to know that history, and also to be about it. Like if Hamilton is about revolution, we're about it. You know, we're here and we're out and we're helping.
Yeah, I mean it, and that was one of the things predominantly for Pride for All Black Lives, because there was the hashtag All Black Lives.
Yeah,
we really wanted to talk about the our trans siblings who do not get the level of press that, you know, our cis siblings do. So that was one thing that we really wanted to shine a spotlight on, and we had incredible performers and speakers that kind of just continued to share their experiences. And it's traumatic, you know, but it's also that we have to hear these stories so that we can have a better understanding of what is going on and what is happening, you know, outside of our understanding, right? And have a better and more compassion for what other people are experiencing. And we have to make sure that we have to give voice to as many people as possible. That to me is a true free democracy. And, you know, every corporation has a ways to go, like every company, you know, and putting your money where your mouth is, and putting your practices and policies where your mouth is important. And it's always hard to hold people up to that standard, but I'm grateful that I'm in a position, and I feel as though I can hopefully continue to make some change across Broadway, and in small ways, big ways, however I can, because there is still a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
You're multi-talented, you know, and your music has been commissioned in TV shows. How does your creative process look like?
Ooh, oh my gosh, my creative process looks insane. That's what I mean. I could show you a script right now that I just every single word, especially if I'm playing someone real, I love to do research. Like right now I'm working on the Louis Armstrong musical. And I'm playing a real person. And so I'm just like trying to find as much research as I possibly can. I do a lot of, if I'm creating the person, I do a lot of backstory. I'm a writer as well. So I like to write like, okay, like this is what, you know, this is where I'm from. This is where I grew up. And then I go through and I really try to read the text as if I was a writer, you know, like what did the writer truly mean by this? And if I have access to the writer, you know, I want to have those conversations as best as I can to be like, what's the intention here? Like how do you see this character? And what was one of the amazing things about Hamilton is I got to have like a meeting with Ron Chernow, who wrote the book that Lynn read and got inspired by. And he talked so beautifully and elegantly about Eliza. And I was just like, I just got like that almost firsthand information about her. But I dissect scripts like it looks like hieroglyphics all over the
got your red string.
Oh, it's insane. Yeah. I have friends. So with filming like a movie or something, you film it all out of order. Yeah. So you have to kind of keep order. So it does look like a murder board, you know, like in your house. You're like, wait, okay, that scene, that happens here, and this, and I have to remember to have this moment. Because sometimes you're jumping into a scene where you're like, okay, it's 3 days later and you've had this fight, and you're like, wait, you haven't had that fight yet. So I have to imagine what that fight would have felt like and how I'm going to feel on the other end of it, you know, because things are just not always going to line up chronologically. So it's interesting to kind of play with that, and I like to dig into the text. Like that's my favorite thing. I love words. So it's just like, I want to know, and I want to like ask the director really annoying questions, you know, and to see like really what their vision is. Like I feel like it's so collaborative, and I try to be as collaborative as possible. So I want to know like what their vision is for this moment, so that I can hopefully give them what they envision and surprise them with something. as well, you know?
I'm assuming one of your pet peeves is like a cryptic text or like a okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's fun because it's like, well, I mean, I'm never going to do it the same way twice, you know, like even with Hamilton, like as much as you can easily do, like people always go, oh, how do you do 8 shows in a week and keep it fresh? It's like nothing is ever the same. Like you're never the same. You know, you wake up that day and you're like a completely different person. You know, you're like, oh my nose, this nostril stuffy, like this hurts, that aches, you know, I don't feel good. You know, someone just sent you some crazy message. You're in a different headspace, you know, or you fought with your partner that day and you come in with a different energy every single day. So it's always different. And so I try to keep things and try to do things um as like in the moment as possible. I think staying present is really important. It's like you can do all the research you want and
Mm.
then staying as present. When you have someone like London, like you can't really craft that. You know, you have
Yeah.
to just kind of play off what he's giving you, you know, like he's going to give you a whole bunch of things and sometimes like he will change up lines a little bit. He'll like add his things. He's constantly eating. You know, how does the eating make me feel? You know, like you know, it's like so you really like for me it's like playing off that really fun energy and seeing like what is he gonna do and then playing off that and being the like given the freedom because sometimes they're like okay we got the take now let's just do one
Yeah.
whatever like you know the scene let's just do it for fun and then a lot of times that's what they end up using because it's like the most improv or organic you know moments and they want to capture that like real reaction so you do your research and then you kind of let it all go.
Because even in the most recent episode, the diner scene, you were like,
Yeah.
you'll remember this coffee, and then London Brown has got like all of his food around it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, full meal. And it's like, no, we just came for coffee, but okay. You know, yeah, it's his thing. And like, I love when some actors like Brad Pitt always eats too. Like it's a really cool, not only device, but it's just like, yeah, I was like, okay, how do I look at him when he's eating? You know, like, do I judge it? Do I enjoy it? Like, if does it arouse me at all? Like, it's kind of fun to play with that. Like, yeah.
Oh,
Does it make me
I
angry?
feel
What
the
is
sexual tension. He's a very distracting person.
it? Yeah, yeah. He's a very beautiful man.
So when you get a script for a film or TV, do you find it that it's easier with your theater background to just memorize it all?
Well, it's so funny with film and TV. Like, I typically, as much as I want to memorize everything, it depends on if something is like r really like, if there's a big monologue.
Hmm.
Because I tell you, from 9 out of 10 things I've ever done, you walk in that day, you've been sitting for 6 hours memorizing things, and then they're like, new pages, and you're like, ah, you know, and you're sitting in the makeup chair going, okay, blah, 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 let me try to memorize this, and sometimes that helps just keep it really fresh, you know, but it's like, yeah, you can try to memorize as much as you possibly can, or for me, but I also am prepared. For me, I'm like, what's my character? What's the arc? What's our relationship? And then within that, whatever has to change can change, and I feel like it can just kind of click, you know? And it's like, that's the great thing with film and TV too. If you don't get it right, they're like, okay, do it again and say the actual one. You know, you know, you mess up Lin Manuel's words and everyone in the audience is like, yeah, we know it. You know, like, you know, I one time messed up really bad in Rent. And but I have this like amazing ability to fit in fake words to where it's supposed to go. So like it'll sound like the writing, but it's not what's written. And I had someone after the show like say, "Oh my gosh, did they rewrite that song?" I was like, "No, no, I just made up words and put them in there." And I'm sure that Jonathan Larson is turning in his grave right now, and I will never do that again. But yeah, with theater, you have to be so like DLP, dead letter perfect. And with film and TV, there's something like you're trying to catch a moment, you know, so things kind of can roll off a little bit easier and things change, especially with TV shows.
So you're an equalizer. How was it working with Queen Latifah?
I cried.
We cried. We cried watching you.
I cried. I walked on set and she was like, "Welcome to the family." And I just went, I was like, I'm so sorry. I just sat in makeup for like 2 hours and I was just like, I'm just so happy to be here. And I think you're so amazing. And she's like, I think you're amazing. And I was like, I can't. You didn't have to say that. Like, I was like, let's just do the scene. And she was also one of those people, like kind of like London, where it's just like she's fast and loose, like,
Yeah.
and she would get the script, she'd look at it, and she'd be like, yeah. I say, okay, yeah, all right, and kind of just like put it away and be like, I'm gonna ingest this. Like it would be most of the script, but it would be her, and like she would add her nuances or be like, this is how I think it should feel and move and like, and I love working with her in that way because she's like, oh, she was easy, she was like very welcoming, as nice as you think that she's actually going to be, probably more so than she even needs to be. And just kind of like excited to do it. Like she's like, let's go. Like she just has all of this energy and I truly don't know how. And she was just very like supportive. So yeah, she's queen for a reason.
And lastly, you've got all the budget in the world. You've got all the cast you want for a Broadway production of your life
gosh.
so far. What is it called?
What? Of my life so far? Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. All the budget in the world, all the cast in the world. Oh my God, who would even play me? Would I play me?
Of course.
Oh my God. Oh gosh. The first thing that came to me, the struggle is real. That doesn't sound uplifting.
It's real though.
But because like it is constantly like you're constantly pushing yourself, like and you're constantly, especially as a Black artist, like I truly, truly believe that we have to work so much harder and we have to get really half as far in any industry and particularly in art, so I feel like, yeah, it's oh no, and the show goes on because through all of the things, theater, storytelling, film and TV has always been my rock and my anchor. And it's like that's my happy place. Getting to create and perform and connect with people and connect on this really deep level is the best job for me in the world. And that's the moments where I think like I really find my peace and my joy. And even when I can sit back and go, like when I get to see the audience afterwards, and sometimes meet the audience, and if someone's crying and they cry in my arms and we just like have a shared experience, it's like I can think of that moment when I'm struggling, when the struggle is real, and be lifted up and go, okay, like this is why we do this. There is something really compelling and great in this world of storytelling, and we need to tell more stories and we need to tell more diverse stories and continue to connect to our compassion and humanity.
Thank you so much for your time. You are literally
thank
everywhere.
You guys so much for having
love
me.
to see it. You're literal sunshine.
Thank you.
We loved having you.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you guys so much. You've been so awesome, amazing questions, and I really, really, really appreciate being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So obviously on Broadway, Hamilton, Raising Kanan, Girlfriendship in October.
On October 1st.
Where else can we find you when you want us to find you on socials and that sort of
thing? Yes. I am on Instagram at Crystal Joy Brown and TikTok at Only KJB. And you can check out my website, thekjb.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. You're wonderful. Thank you.